The Grifter's Bible, a novel by El Shaboons, read by El Shaboons, with sound design by Monumental Sonic Architecture. Chapter 7. Fire and Save Matches. After 4 Sundays, my hands had reached critical mass. They looked and felt like matching third-degree sunburns, like I'd picked up 2 cast-iron skillets in Death Valley. My fingerprints were shiny like fish belly, puckered like pike. They had been wiped away by the friction from the mallets. From the white tips to the pink pads, the broken blisters couldn't even callus, because our busy rehearsal schedule didn't allow for the healing process to unfold. Because Seth wanted his new band ready, I had to suffer. So I had taken to gnawing on the pain of closing my swelling fists into tight balls of tension to take my mind off of our first show as a full band. I was compulsively digging my dirty fingernails into the separating skin as I climbed the stairs on my way to check on the beast. The sting doubled, then trebled. My sinuses fluttered like I was staring at the sun. My toe touched the top stair and the white light overtook me. I swooned. Seth threw his face towards the floor like he was banging his head. I had to dodge out of the way of his dreads as they flew forward with the motion. Within the space of a breath, he flung his thick cables of unkempt hair back and retook his full height. His dreads drummed all the way down his back. "What the hell crawled all over you?" My jaw hung ajar once the sentence left my mouth. Seth popped one cuff and then the other, and then he adjusted the ivory knot of his tie before deigning to answer. "Old Velvety Walker's got the right idea, Glasses. Daddy's got to shine like a star if the people are going to follow." He flicked the unkempt scruff of his malformed gruff off the bib of the fine-tailored shirt. "What's the thread count on that thing? How much did all this business cost?" I worried. "It's not about money. It's about looking like miracles happen." He shrugged until his sleeves fell exactly where he wanted them. I held up my stiffening hands. "Oh yeah? You got any miracles shoved up your ass that'll fix these?" "Woo, doggies!" Dwayne arrived up the stairs just in time to see the damage. "Them suckers are scorched, with all due respect. Y'all gonna want to pray for a miracle on those." "Miracle, huh?" That's all Seth said as he lumbered past Dwayne. He turned into thunder as he trampled down the stairs, off on some mission that I knew I was going to regret. I looked Dwayne up and down. He looked like 3 dudes from the Nation of Islam all crammed into the same sober black suit and stoic bow tie. Dwayne looked like a Huffalump in sausage casing, but he shined up good when he took a notion. In contrast, I assessed the worn knees on my khakis, my ragged-out chucks, and the crew neck for my wardrobe of plain white shirts that had the least noticeably yellow pit stains. I looked like on a Sunday cracker. I looked back at Dwayne's togetherness, but I couldn't make eye contact with him. I cleared the guilt from my throat. I thought about apologizing for not dressing up more, but then I heard the sound of buffaloes stampeding up the steps. I saw it blur out of the corner of my eye, and by the time I had turned my head, Seth was back. "Let's see them things." His thumbnail dug a divot of flesh into my right wrist as he forced my hand over. "Ah!" I flinched and let him flip my palm up to maybe buy myself some mercy with compliance. "What do you think you're doing?" Lightning was in his eyes. "One monkey don't stop the show." "Here we go." Dwayne's face drew up into a study in giddy anticipation. I don't know what he was expecting. "You want a miracle?" Seth challenged me. "Well, I got mysterious ways up my sleeve." He yanked me forward by the wrist and raised his other hand over our heads. The ball of my shoulder popped in the socket. I burped acid up the back of my throat. I was waiting to get slapped on the forehead. I caught a quick glint of something silver sparkling in the light. "In the name of the Lord," Seth shouted. "Heal!" Something clear oozed from the tiny aluminum nozzle that peeked from out of his hand. Dwayne hopped up and down like he had to take a leap. The glee of imminent witness was writ large across his face. He clapped like a tubby fruit. Avarice for divinity filled his flashing eyes. "Here it comes," he slavered. Seth closed his fist on the orange and white tube of model airplane glue. My viscous miracle dribbled down like manna until my chapped right hand was covered in globs of crystalline adhesive gel. I barely noticed the chemicals heating up on my palm. I just stared in horror while Seth threw down my right hand and then repeated the swirling, squeezing motion over my left. He depleted the tube of its remaining contents until the last translucent drop glopped out of the nozzle, clearing out with one final toot of trapped air. Seth tossed the crinkled tube back over his shoulder in one smooth movement. It hit the rim of the bin and then clattered in. Seth snapped his fingers like Jiminy Cricket and then gave me the magician's hands. Ta-da! He smiled. Asshole. Time! Fat was out of breath when he reached the top of the stairs. Gather up, y'all. Dwayne grabbed my left wrist and pulled Fat in by his right hand. Brother Joe, you want a word before the show? Seth loved little deferential gestures like that. There you go, Brother D. He snapped up Dwayne's free hand and my lank wrist. What I want is for all of us to go down there and take those people in the audience to another place. I want to inspire them like they've inspired me. I want them to be the best versions of the people that they already are. So that means we gotta be the best version of us that we can be. We're ready. Dwayne's nostrils flared as he nodded in anticipation. His eyes never opened. You know that's right, D. Seth paused to suck in a long breath. So I just want us all to go out there and have us the best time ever, y'all. Seth raised our hands. Dear Lord, let us be your banner, your standard, your flag. We're gonna hold it up if you let it fly. Amen. Woo! Amen to that. Dwayne crowed as we all opened our eyes. He had the look of hero worship on his face as he thrust Fat's fist and mine in the air with the anticipation of our approaching glory. Seth fixed his coat. Okay then, in the name of Jesus, let's shine like only the brightest flames can. Then Dwayne and Fat turned on a heel and left to take their places on stage. I held up my frazzled hands. But seriously, what about this? I took Seth a step to the side. The glue's funny, but I've still got the gift that keeps on giving. Just shut your trap and plunk your magic twanger. Seth shrugged as he molded his face in the mirror. I can't play like this. I got bupkis, I whined. Ugh, he huffed. Are we still talking about this? Seth stepped away into his private bathroom. Here. He came back and slapped me in the chest with a package of blue rubber dishwashing gloves. I bought these for Sarah so she can scrub my toilet. But if you're gonna act like an old lady, then I'll just give them to you. The word gloves sagged like deflated balloons in my beaten down hands. Seth was already halfway down the stairs. I pulled on the gloves and followed him, stepping down into the burnt ass hair smell of fresh permanents going flat due to the excessive humidity inside the sanctuary. The stiff whiff of a warm, wet womb wafted up the stairwell. Waves of hands crashed on Seth's shoulders and the face of the multitude broke into a smile. The crowd closed around Seth and I had lost sight of him by the time I made it to the stage. Utterly unhindered, I stepped up to join Fat and Dwayne. I took my position behind the drum, grabbed my mallets, and watched the boil of souls that Billy Goat descended into in order to extricate Seth from the mob of fawning hands that was keeping him from getting to the stage. Laughing at all of the attention, Seth grabbed onto Billy Goat's dress shirt as the bow hump cut through the press of people like a Sherman tank through warm butter. Fat reached over and took Seth's mic off of the stand. Billy Goat reached the footlights and then stepped out of the way to allow Seth to place a foot forward between the two vocal monitors. Fat threw the mic and Seth caught it in motion as Billy Goat gave him a boost up onto the stage. Sometimes you just gotta say yeah! Yeah! Seth exhorted the flock with his back turned and his arms splayed upwards like a V. Anybody around here remember how to say a amen? Amen! They responded to his call with unanimous thunder. Anybody around here heard about a man coming to sing your blues away? I gave the band a count and we lunged forward like a well-tuned unit straight into the faces of the flock. Ready or not, we swept them up into a blistering rendition of Woody Guthrie's Jesus Christ. Like a roller coaster we rumbled, and the mass threw their hands up in the air and screamed. The dishwashing gloves did the trick. They acted as a thick second layer of skin held into place by the melting glue on my hands so that there was no actual friction occurring against my bare flesh. No matter how hard I played, my hands did not malinger, and I felt no urge to wince. I got the feeling like I could make it through the whole show. I bent down to put the bump on the tom-tom even harder than I had in all of our days of rehearsal. The band grabbed the mass by their collective ass and just absolutely wouldn't let go as we swept the people up into the howl of our jet stream. With each percussive thrust, my general bad mood from the state of my hands evaporated into the haze. I was bombed on the narcotic of fraternity. I lifted my head up and giggled out loud. Why shouldn't I? Exhilaration filled the congregation, and they melded into a whole like some jubilant king rat with a holy rolling soul. The united body seemed to hover up an inch or two into the ether just from jamming so hard. Their minds were open, and they sailed on a guttural body high. They yelled with abandon and were glad to be there. Seth was wreathed in a halo of spotlight shining down on his new suit from above as he clapped his hands over his head. There was so much moisture attendant with the rising degrees of body heat building in the air that when he whipped his arms back and forth in the ghostly condensation, it sparkled like white glittering wings extending from his flicking wrists. The heat from the equipment and the audience's perfume of exuberance created our own personal atmosphere inside the greenhouse sanctuary, and there was a weird amber dew point when liquefied brown tar from years of cigarette smoke descended from the ceiling in a sticky mist of syrup. The band eventually downshifted into hymns to mollify the flock. In this stage of the Beast mainline programming, the magnetic ambiance hummed softly inside of the hypothalamus, slowing the firing of neurons in the locus coeruleus to soothe the sensory cortex. A lateral burst pattern temporarily reduced the release of adrenaline and norepinephrine to the nervous system of anyone in the magnetic field. The Beast massaged the fight-or-flight mechanism inside the brains of the flock and replaced it with a glowing cloak of serenity. Honey-baked calm passed like a mask over the sheep's eyes as the magnets decelerated their heart and lung action and cooled instantaneous reflexes. The audience gazed with all of the guile of grazing livestock when Seth told them where to line up. The street team knew the routine with the juice and the crackers, so I was free to leave. I left the blessings of the host behind and went to ramp up the magnets while Seth presided over communion. After crawling only halfway down the access tunnel, I could already whiff something out of whack coming from the rat's nest. As my knees picked up another coat of dust, my nose picked up the faint taint of something ephemeral as an angel fart that wasn't part of the usual heat and stifling grime that I had to contend with on Sundays. At the mouth of the tunnel, the stink of burning was evident. I could follow it, sniffing in the gruel of odors like a bloodhound, over to the battery array. The raspy mastic of gas-inducing plastic vapor that boiled out of the crawl space immediately took precedence over the mounting throb and piquant reek from my hands. I fingered around for my flashlight and hit the switch when I found it. I scanned up the 4 rows of batteries in search for smoke or bubbling polymer. There was nothing immediately evident, just the inert gloom in the crawl space and the sound of the congregation simmering downstairs. But something made my head swim whenever I moved near the array. I reached over and pushed the window pane open a little further. I shoved my face up to the gap and sucked on the fresh air like it was cracked. That's when I noticed the power lines. The mockingbirds and pigeons had grown thick along the power lines that hung outside of the rat's nest in the past month, and the population had grown exponentially with each ignition of the Beast. At times the cables drooped so low beneath the weight of the thick garland of birds teeming on the lines that I was sure they would snap. But that day they were gone. The stacked black utility lines were empty like a musical staff devoid of notes. My eyes started to water when I turned back around. My stomach growled as I went into red alert. I tripped over to my laptop to check for signs of distress, but the computer was cool, just doing its thing. The readouts on the meter bridge were plateaued and holding steady at a very mean level ochre that was right on schedule for that point in the ceremony. I was stumped, so I held my face to the opening in the drywall where the leads fed down into the darkness towards the dangling discs. I tried to angle my field of vision for a better view into the dark. I strained my eyes and said a silent prayer to no one in particular that the magnets had not ignited the insulation somehow. I had tried to clear out all the pink bunting and soundproofing foam before dropping the iron plates down in between the studs, but Sif had kept rushing me through the preparations, so I was never able to confirm that all of the details were 100% nailed down before the night of the first show. My paranoid brain saw visions of the flat platters wobbling wildly in the gloom, bouncing on the electric waves lapping back and forth between the poles. If they ticked too close to the wood or some remaining insulation, there could be flashpoint. Suddenly combustion crowded out every possible endgame popping up inside my brain. I got my nose up to the head-sized hole in the wall. There was only the brown smell of stifling dust down there. I judged no great fluctuations in the pattern of discharging heat rising up to the rafters that might indicate moving flames. I just heard the bustling life as the flock excitedly shuffled in their line towards the Holy Sacrament on the other side of the wall. I looked back at the relay. I went to it. It smelled fine. It felt cool. That left only the batteries to sweat. I looked into the alcove where they lay like robot eggs. I'd barely begun glancing at the state of the cell connections when I heard a muffled Seth cooing about God the Father on the other side of the divider, as Dwayne interjected improvisational gospel licks behind him like he was testifying through the roads. There was still no smoke escaping the array, just that weird stank of burning wrapped up with something more. I got on my knees and eyeballed the stage through the observation slit. I figured that Seth was about 85% of the way through the line of supplicants. I reached over and turned the light of my laptop screen so it illuminated the array. I judged the line for the Eucharist again and then decided that I had time to grab my flashlight and do a quick probe for bad connections, corrosion, or melting. I knelt before the darkened alcove where we had stowed the source of our power, and I shined the light in a cursory glance over the units closest to the lip. Blue stage lights leaked through a crack in the wall and cast weird cerulean shadows on the black battery casings, but I saw no hints of actual trouble or much of anything unusual at all. I figured I'd end up finding the problem all the way in the back of the crawl space anyway, so I decided to cut to the chase and struck out for there first. I pulled out the piece of corrugated cardboard sheeting from under my sleeping bag and laid it on top of the batteries to maybe make my journey a little more comfortable. I am physically suited for working in a small space like that, but I am also mildly claustrophobic, so it was no easy thing trying to wrap my confidence around the thought of performing maintenance splayed out across live batteries in the close darkness like that. It was best not to think of it, so I turned the flashlight on and put it between my teeth to light my way forward as I heaved myself towards the barrier wall. I couldn't get my glasses to stay up on the bridge of my sweat-slick nose for love or money by the time I finally reached the far side of the crawl space. I tried to turn over and prop myself up. In that position, my ear was mashed against the wall, and I could hear shouts of elation as the mob ramped up near the conclusion of communion. I wanted out of that electrified black hole. My rubber-covered fingers made it a pain in the ass to sort through the countless tangles of wiring at the back of the array, and I struggled through the various rainbows of plastic-jacketed spaghetti. I leaned my head in perspiration against the 2x4 and blinked one of my eyes. I yawned and smacked my lips. I couldn't help it. My mind wandered. I shook off the distraction from the task at hand and felt a bead of sweat crawl down my temple. I closed my eyelids to seal off the drop. Behind the Eigengrau curtain, I saw colorful, solarized retinae like mandalas and fingerprints flashing on a thin scrim of skin. It tickled. I shivered from out of the depths of my soul. My shoulders hunched in an involuntary muscle spasm, and I accidentally dropped the flashlight onto the array. I turned on my side, and my elbow sent the flashlight clattering down below two of the batteries. I looked beneath the slats of one of the two wooden shipping pallets that the cradles rested on just as the beam strobed up into my eyes for a second before rolling out of sight. I was dazzled. I struggled to draw a bead on where the red-brushed aluminum tube had gone. I banged my head against the wall, trying to inch into a good position to get my hand beneath the casings. The flashlight stopped rolling just beyond my fingertips. I almost touched it, but then a large splinter from the pallet gouged at the web of my elbow and scratched up half the length of my bicep. The sleeve of my shirt ripped. I mouthed silent profanity and grimaced in pain as a red line drew itself down my arm. The confined space was starting to freak me out, and liquid anxiety was surging down my spine. I stopped to gather my wits. I listened to the deep resonant sound of Seth's voice muffled by pressboard and the low buzzing from the coils inside of the walls. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. The flashlight lay beneath the batteries just below my chest, and no matter how I turned, my left arm was just short enough that I could only brush it with a fingertip. On the verge of tears of frustration, I pressed my head against the sideboards in the crawl space and rallied a stabbing jab of my arm in the general vicinity of the tiny light. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses. My neck muscles strained, and acid poured into my shoulders. My fingers trembled with success when I laid them on the flashlight. Then the cylinder rolled a quarter turn just out of reach. As we forgive those who trespass against us, I scrunched my eyes closed in defeat and felt the sweat on my face mushing with the dust on the battery cradle, making a fine mask of mud on my left cheek. The beast waltzed its way inside of my head, and fireworks exploded behind my closed eyelids, leaving a whiff of angels floating in the sparks. "And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil." I roused myself out of the beast's sway with a shake of my head. "For thine is the kingdom, and the power." But my eyes drooped back down, unable to deny the power. "And the glory." Seth's voice came from space when he said, "Forever and ever and ever." Then my jaw touched down on one of the boards in the alcove. I heard, "Amen." And the next thing I knew, I was falling through the stratosphere. It felt like the cradle of the battery array just opened up like gantry doors. I dropped like a bomb from out of the darkness and into a salmon sky above the city grid. I could see the illuminated circuit board eclipsed as some great dark wing from the streets rose up to meet me. I coughed in the crawl space as the inky black spread in my hallucination. Physically engulfed in unctuous vertigo, I watched the glint of sun twinkling on 500 chattering chitinous beaks. I plummeted through the feathered cloud. My breath whooshed out of me as I was boosted bodily by this net of birds. My toes pointed and flexed. I kept splaying my fingers either for real or in the dream, maybe both. I turned my head in the tight, in the dust, in the heat. I saw the trajectory of birds thrusting up towards the thermosphere. I saw something greater than the sun in the distance. It was coming down fast. What does it feel like when God approaches? No shroud of Turin, no image of Edessa, no guilt icon of the Trinity that I can recall sufficiently predicts what you will see when you encounter El, Allah, or Om. But I will be haunted to my grave by the feeling of expanding serenity that preceded the arrival of Akon Car on the Sunday when I blew up. I remember the seconds just before I lost my virginity. If there's ever a hallelujah moment for an apocalyptically horny 16-year-old, then that's it. In that moment you realize that you're about to shed the smothering veil of adolescent ignorance. It's like the clouds parting as you lift off into a new world. I was handsome for about 2 seconds when I was 16, and I had dropped all of my baby fat. That's back when I first started venturing out to the warehouse parties in Deep Ellum. Ecstasy was in its second flowering, and I finally hooked up with some Aquanet queen in a bathroom stall at Adam's Hats. I had never made it past first base, so I was bumbling around like a blind man in a bookstore. I thought I was hot when I finally touched her panties. If it had been up to me, it probably would have ended there. But she blew huffy clove cigarette smoke in my face. She grabbed my hand like, "Here's stupid," and pressed my fingers up to her panties. I'm surprised I didn't white out right there. All the blood left my head as she moved my fingers onto 2 snaps at the crotch of her lingerie. Her fingers directed mine and we popped those snaps open. It felt like we were unsealing a chamber in the pyramids. In that stultifying moment of realization, I felt myself with one leg slung over the secret of the universe. I was flooded with gratitude for assertive girls. They will always be holy in my eyes. No matter what happened after what she did, I knew I'd at least have that whole virginity problem licked for the rest of my days. The Holy Presence manifested the same realization that an antidote to all that anxiety is imminent. That's what it feels like when God approaches. And who wouldn't try to fly towards that? The solar dwarf bore down and filled my vision as the bird strained at the bridle of gravity, trying to bisect the sun's trajectory. I watched flames lick at the Van Allen belts and saw scorched satellite dishes fall. The nullifying star grew close and swallowed the outliers. The vanguard of birds cried with joy for obliteration. Feathers and the hair on my arms burned into dust. I watched a Man Ray photo of the city being consumed by light. I blinked and the city was gone. I saw atomic nirvana staring back at me. I saw the answer to the riddle of my ruin. Fiery pixels ate up my ankles, shins, and knees until the Holy Presence had claimed me in whole. I was aware of my body returning to all of the carbon that ever was, and I felt all of the electricity in my brain dissipating back into the stream of energy that turns the mill of the universe. My consciousness was swept under black waves of nothing, but the burning sensation in my legs remained. I sniffled and sweated myself awake. I blinked in the darkness of the crawl space. I must have been writhing while I was under. I had twisted onto my back with my left arm turned up underneath me. My hand was pinned beneath the pallets with the tip of one rubber-gloved finger snagged on a nail. Seth was speaking and tooting on his harmonica somewhere on the other side of the wall. The audience was all into it from the sounds of excitation. I turned my head and blasted some dust out of my nose farm style. The ball of my shoulder screamed inside of its socket. That shook off the last of the muddiness and I was fully back to reality. I craned my neck to get a look down at my feet. My pants leg was on fire. My left ankle had wedged between the 16th and 17th batteries in the grid, and the two were steadily arcing back and forth in a thin scrawl of tiny blue lightning. Frayed cotton fibers lay in the middle of a blue flame. Orange cinders radiated throughout the blackening cotton blend and singed the hair on my leg. I lost it and irrationally kicked at the poles on number 16 with my foot, trying to get my shoelace loose. There was a sharp tear in the air as I finally freed my pants leg from the cracked battery casing that it had snagged on. I slammed the ham of my right leg down on the left shin and black khaki cinders jumped up into the air. I started rolling back and forth in the crawl space, feeling the sharp corners of the batteries digging into my sides and back. The tip of my gloved finger tore free from the nail where it had hung, but my hand was still trapped under the battery cradle because my body was holding my forearm down. I shifted my weight and felt my pinned arm loosen up from its snag. My hand slowly freed and I dragged my paralytic arm from out of its plywood snare. I was still stuck headfirst in the crawl space with the burning batteries left to confront, even if I could get turned around. I got down to business and pulled my leg away from the tiny electrical storm rising off the misfiring poles and rolled over onto my side. I scrunched my knees up towards my chin in the minimal slip of open space and scratched my thigh on the pressboard roof. I pinwheeled around and touched my toes against the face of the barrier wall. I pushed out with my feet and extended my body forward. My shoulder and back scoured across the cradle as I pushed my face up towards the fire. Battery number 16 was rattling in its case just inches away from my eyes. It sounded like it was about to explode. A thin stream of sulfuric acid was aspirating from a crack, which meant that heated gas was building up pressure inside of the cells. I looked at my hands and I was glad that they were rubber. I took a deep breath and clamped an insulated glove onto each set of leads, preparing to pull the cables free. I yanked and jerked my elbows back. I saw the rat's nest instantly filled with all of the bright light of my dream of the sun. I smelled smoke and sauteed meat. I heard the sound of popping bacon grease. I was thrown up into the ceiling of the crawl space. I saw stars and more birds. And then I lost track of what all came next as my body rose up into the widest oblivion ever. I blinked when I saw the light. The light of near death hovered over me. I stared up at its singularity and waited for my eyes to adjust enough to define the outline of the face of God. He's back, y'all. I got eye movement. I felt the weight of a hand on my shoulder and the light was suddenly flipped up and manhandled away. I turned my face to the side and saw wide hips and navy blue scrubs leaning in towards me. I deluded myself that it was the plus-size version of my angel of the snap-fastened yoni. The puffed-up fantasy of the long-gone girl that I lost my virginity to filled my head up with flowers, and I tried to figure out who was there. Was she some guide on my passage through heaven's gates? I was in shock and making things up. Still, I could feel an erection coming on. Baby, y'all got to lie still for Miss Mary so I can do my job. Mary. The Blessed Mother. Lady Madonna. My left nostril was stopped up and I heard my voice from inside of my head. This heaven? Creaked out of my grizzled lips in a cotton-mouthed query. I heard a gentle snort, and then, Baby, you're in the emergency room. Miss Mary's trying to keep you here on this side of heaven, but you gotta lie still for me. Emergency? I felt no pain aside from pressure rearing up in my bowels as they grumbled for release. My mind was cognizant of the process of my body floating into the undertow of a chrome wave of shock. Shivers filled my shoulder and my stomach shouted out above the local din of surgery. I could feel days-old pressing its turtle head against my back door and crying. My eyes were glazing, but I could make out dark skin in the scrubs, and I smelled fresh laundry and cookies. Like a baby bird, my lollipop head craned upwards on a wobbly neck, and I begged into the air. Can I do something about that? I was indicating towards my stomach. Baby, you nasty. I felt a love tap on my forearm and saw a disgusted recoil in the nurse's masked movement. I caught a bit of a giggle in her remark. I fought to lift my head up to see what she saw. I still had my boner from before. I snorted and my blocked nostril popped. No, my stomach, not the other. I couldn't fit words together into coherent sentences. Well, you can play with yourself or you can have a poop. You can do whatever you want to do once I get you stabilized and the doctor gets back over here to take a look at you. You got a big old shock, honey. It's a little bit more than a tase, I tell you, but I'm going to get you out of my emergency room quick if y'all let me do my thing. I slurred a warning. No, seriously. My eyes held her eyes and I raced to explain. Number 2, now. I even used emergency room lingo on her. Stat. All I felt was a starched boob at my cheek and the redoubled pressure of hands on both of my shoulders as she leaned over me. Easy, baby. The doctor's on its way. We're gonna hurry. My worried eyes caught a mild smile in her eyes, and from behind her mask she giggled. Stat. It was not a matter of free will any longer. My body had ceased to succumb to the commands that my conscious brain would send it. I was ready to pop. Peristalsis doubled me up. Can't hold it, I whined as my cheeks quivered. I felt a little squirt. I looked down past the teepee in my smock and I saw that I was lying on an operating table with a drain in the middle. They could clean it pretty easily if they had to. Sorry. My head fell back on the table, but I warned you. It came out sounding mean, but I really was sorry. There was a mild curse at my side. Don't you do that to me. My vision blurred. I heard a scream from somewhere else in the room, and then, oh, no. Real close. I felt warmth at my back. I needed a diaper. I faded under black water.